The community center was buzzing that evening. It was the town's annual talent showcase, and everyone looked forward to it all year. Kids, teenagers, and adults all came to show what they could do. Some sang, some danced, some played instruments, and some just came to watch and cheer. Among the crowd stood Ethan, a quiet young man in his mid-20s. He had a calm face, always polite and soft-spoken. Most people knew him from the local bookstore where he worked. He wasn't the kind of person who talked much or liked attention, but this year, for the first time, he had signed up to perform at the show. No one really knew what he planned to do. Some guessed maybe he would read poetry or maybe play something simple. He hadn't told anyone. But one person found out, and she wasn't exactly thrilled about it. Her name was Clara. She was confident, stylish, and loved the spotlight. Everyone in town knew her as the piano girl. She had been playing since she was little and had performed in almost every event the town ever held. She enjoyed the attention, and people admired her for her talent. When Clara heard that Ethan had signed up to play piano too, she couldn't help but laugh. In her mind, there was no way that quiet, awkward guy could be any good. She felt the stage belonged to her, not to someone like him. A few days before the event, she got an idea, a little plan that she thought would be funny. She went to Mrs. Parker, the event organizer, and said, "Hey, I think it would be really fun if we had a duet challenge this year. Maybe I could play with Ethan. It would make things more exciting." Mrs. Parker smiled and said, "That's a lovely idea, Clara. I'm sure Ethan won't mind." But Clara hadn't actually asked Ethan. She just assumed he'd go along with it. She wanted to show everyone the difference between a trained musician like her and a beginner like him. On the evening of the show, people filled the hall. Laughter, chatter, and the smell of snacks filled the air. Ethan came early and quietly found a seat near the side of the stage. He looked calm, though he hadn't expected what was about to happen. When his name was announced, he stood up, ready to perform alone. But then he heard the host say, "Up next, we have a special duet performance by Clara and Ethan." He looked up in surprise. Clara smiled brightly from across the room, already walking to the piano. The audience clapped, thinking it was planned. Ethan hesitated for a second, then took a quiet breath and walked toward the stage. "Hey," Clara said in a sweet but teasing tone. "Hope you don't mind a little duet." "It'll be fun," Ethan smiled politely. "Sure," he said softly. "Let's do it." She smirked, not expecting him to agree so easily. She had planned everything to make him look silly, but his calmness threw her off just a little. The stage lights dimmed and the crowd grew quiet. The piano gleamed under the spotlight. Clara took the bench first, sitting tall with perfect posture. Ethan stood beside her, waiting. Clara began to play, a fast, showy piece full of jumps and runs. Her fingers moved quickly and the music filled the hall with energy. She smiled proudly, occasionally glancing at Ethan as if to say, "See? This is how it's done." The crowd clapped halfway through. Everyone was impressed as usual. Clara ended her piece with a dramatic final note and turned slightly toward Ethan. "Your turn," she said with a little grin. Ethan nodded and sat down quietly. He didn't rush. He adjusted the bench a little, rolled his shoulders, and rested his fingers on the keys. For a few seconds, he just sat there. The audience waited, whispering softly. Then he began to play. The first few notes were slow, soft, gentle, and full of feeling. The melody was simple at first, almost like he was talking through the piano. Then, as he continued, the sound grew deeper, more powerful. People stopped whispering. The hall went completely silent. Ethan wasn't just playing a song, he was telling a story. His music wasn't loud or flashy like Clara's. It was honest, full of emotion. Every note seemed to carry a piece of his heart. As he played, his mind drifted. He remembered his mother, who had been a piano teacher before she passed away years ago. She was the one who had taught him how to play. He hadn't touched the piano in front of anyone since her death. It had always been too painful. But that night he felt ready. His fingers moved effortlessly and his expression was peaceful. The music seemed to fill every corner of the room, wrapping everyone in its warmth. Clara stood beside him, frozen. Her smile had vanished. She had expected him to fumble, to make mistakes, to look nervous. But instead, she was watching someone who clearly lived and breathed music. Ethan finished the last section with a soft, emotional phrase that hung in the air for a moment, before fading into silence. No one moved. Then one person started clapping. Another joined, And then the whole hall burst into applause. Clara clapped too, though she looked stunned. Ethan stood, gave a small nod of thanks, and smiled. He didn't look proud or smug, just content. When the applause died down, Clara leaned toward him and whispered, "I didn't know you could play like that." Ethan smiled again, softly. "There's a lot people don't know," he said gently. He walked off the stage quietly while people still clapped. Clara stayed behind for a moment, staring at the piano, her mind spinning. The rest of the show went on, but everyone kept talking about that moment. People couldn't believe what they had just heard. Some said it was the most beautiful piece they'd ever listened to at the community event. Afterward, Clara found Ethan near the refreshment table. He was helping Mrs. Parker pick up empty cups, still wearing that same calm smile. "You really surprised everyone," she said, trying to sound casual. Ethan looked at her and said kindly, "You play beautifully, Clara. I liked your piece." She blinked, not expecting a compliment from him. "Thanks," she said quietly, "but where did you learn to play like that?" "My mom taught me," he said simply. "She used to be a piano teacher. I stopped playing for a while, but tonight felt like the right time." Clara nodded, feeling something she wasn't used to: humility. For the first time, she realized that talent wasn't about showing off. It was about heart. That night, as she walked home, Clara couldn't stop thinking about what happened. She had tried to embarrass Ethan, but he had done something she didn't expect. He made her feel small in the best way possible. Not because he showed off, but because he showed what real passion looked like. At home, she sat by her own piano and touched the keys gently. For the first time, she didn't play to impress anyone. She played quietly, just for herself, thinking about the calm young man who had taught her a silent lesson in humility. Meanwhile, Ethan walked home under the streetlights, feeling lighter than he had in years. He had faced his fear, shared a piece of his heart, and honored his mother's memory. He didn't care about applause or attention. He was just happy he played again. But what neither of them knew that night was that this small moment, the duet that wasn't supposed to happen, was about to change both their lives in ways they couldn't imagine, because sometimes one act of grace can silence arrogance more powerfully than any argument ever could. And for Clara, the sound of Ethan's music would stay in her mind long after the applause faded away. That night after the talent show, Ethan walked home under the quiet sky. The streetlights glowed softly and the air was cool. He felt peaceful inside, lighter than he had in a long time. For years, he had kept his music hidden because it reminded him of his mother. But when he played that evening, something inside him opened again. It felt like she was right there beside him, smiling. The next morning, the small town was still talking about his performance. The community center's Facebook page was filled with comments from people who had been there. Everyone was saying the same thing. "That quiet guy on the piano, he was amazing." Ethan saw the posts while sipping his coffee but didn't pay much attention. He wasn't used to compliments and he didn't play for them anyway. For him, it was enough that he had found the courage to perform again. Clara, however, woke up that morning with a strange feeling in her chest. The night before had shaken her. She had gone to the event so sure of herself, ready to make a little joke out of Ethan. But things hadn't gone the way she imagined. She sat at her piano that morning, staring at the keys. For years, she had practiced for hours, learned complicated pieces, and loved the applause. But now, when she pressed the keys, the sound didn't move her like it used to. She realized she had been playing to impress others, not to express herself. Ethan's calm, emotional music had shown her that. That thought stayed with her all day. The next afternoon, she saw Ethan at the bookstore. He was stacking books on a shelf, humming softly to himself. She hesitated at the door for a moment, then walked in. "Hey," she said quietly. Ethan looked up and smiled. "Oh, hi, how are you?" Clara gave a small, shy smile, something people rarely saw from her. "I'm good. I just wanted to say sorry about the other night." Ethan tilted his head. "Sorry for what?" "For, setting up that duet without asking you," she said. "It wasn't fair. I just wanted to show off. But instead you showed me what real music sounds like." Ethan chuckled softly. "It's okay, really, I didn't mind." She looked at him curiously. "You really don't get angry easily, do you?" He smiled. "Anger doesn't help much. I used to get frustrated a lot. especially when I couldn't play something right. My mom used to say music doesn't like pride or anger, it only listens to your heart. Clara nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. She sounds wise. She was, he said softly. She's the reason I play. Clara hesitated, then asked, would you maybe teach me sometime? Not about piano, I mean, I already know the techniques. But I want to learn what you have, that feeling. Ethan looked surprised but nodded. Sure, he said simply. I'd like that. Over the next few weeks, they met at the community center after hours. Clara brought her notebook and a small recorder, eager to learn. But Ethan didn't start with scales or notes, he said. Before you play, you have to listen. Not just to the instrument, but to yourself. What are you feeling today? At first, Clara laughed. What am I feeling? I don't know. Tired, maybe? Then play tired, he said gently. She frowned, but when she started pressing the keys, she noticed something. The sound that came out was soft, slow, and slightly uneven. It actually sounded tired. She looked up at him in surprise. That's it, Ethan said. You played how you feel. That's what makes people connect. As the days went by, they talked more than they played. They talked about music, about life, about fears. Clara learned that Ethan had stopped performing after his mother's death because he couldn't face the piano without remembering her. She told him how she had always tried to be perfect because she was afraid people would forget her otherwise. Slowly, they both began to change. Clara started to smile more naturally without needing attention. Ethan started to open up, laughing more than before. Music, the thing that had once separated them, had become the thing that connected them. One evening, while they were closing the piano lid after practice, Mrs. Parker came into the hall. You two are becoming quite the pair, she said kindly. You know the town festival is coming up next month. Would you like to perform together again? Clara looked at Ethan, unsure. Only if he agrees this time, she said with a grin. Ethan laughed. Sure, let's do it. The next few weeks were filled with practice. But this time there was no competition between them. They worked together, trying to blend their styles. Clara brought her energy and confidence. Ethan brought emotion and soul. The result was something beautiful. During one session, Ethan played a soft tune he had written himself. Clara listened with her eyes closed, then said quietly, That's the most beautiful piece I've ever heard. Thanks, he said. I wrote it for my mom, but I never finished it. Let's finish it together, Clara said. We can play it at the festival. He looked at her, surprised, but smiled. Okay. When the festival night arrived, the town square was full of people. Fairy lights hung across the trees and food stalls lined the streets. The stage was set up in the middle, glowing under the warm lights. Ethan and Clara stood backstage waiting for their turn. She looked nervous this time. I can't believe I'm nervous, she said, laughing softly. Ethan smiled. It means you care. When their names were called, they walked to the stage together. The crowd clapped warmly. Clara sat on one side of the piano, Ethan on the other. They looked at each other and nodded. The first notes began. The melody was soft, calm, and emotional. Clara's part added light and color, while Ethan's side carried the depth and feeling. It was a perfect balance. Two people who once clashed now creating harmony together. The audience listened silently, many holding their breath. As the song built up, the emotion grew stronger. The final notes echoed through the night like a whisper carried by the wind. When they finished, the whole crowd stood up in applause. Some even had tears in their eyes. It wasn't just the music, it was the feeling behind it. Everyone could sense it. Clara looked at Ethan, her eyes shiny. We did it, she whispered. He smiled. We did. After the show, people came up to congratulate them. But for Clara, the real victory wasn't the applause, it was the peace she felt inside. She had learned something that no trophy or praise could give her. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, she sat at the piano alone for a few minutes. She played the same piece softly, remembering the first night she had tried to embarrass Ethan. She smiled at how foolish she had been. Ethan walked in quietly, carrying his jacket. Still practicing? He asked. Just thinking, she said. You know, that first night, I was so full of myself. I wanted people to see me as the best. But now I don't care about that anymore. I just want to play with heart, Ethan nodded. That's the best way to play. There was a short silence, and then she said, Thank you for not making fun of me that night. You could have embarrassed me in return, but you didn't. He smiled gently. My mom used to say kindness speaks louder than pride. I just followed her words. Clara smiled too. She must have been a wonderful person. She was, Ethan said softly. And I think she'd be happy to see us both playing. They laughed, the sound light and warm. The night outside was calm, the stars bright. The piano sat between them like a quiet friend that had seen it all. The pride, the lessons, and the change. From that night on, they continued playing together. Not for competition, not for attention, but for the love of music. Their performances became something people looked forward to, because every time they played, it wasn't just sound. It was a story of humility, friendship, and heart. And though many years would pass, people in that little town would still talk about that one night at the talent show, when a girl tried to embarrass a quiet young man, but his music instead changed her forever.